So I want you to be encouraged about that tonight, because a few weeks ago, we embraced a subject that somewhat dealt with the effects that divorce and separation have on children. We mentioned that divorce and separation divorce will have its own set of consequences that will affect our children in either one way or another. And that's not necessarily always in a bad way. I know sometimes that's the tone and the context, but it's not necessarily true. But still, let's be sure it will affect us in one way or another. Some children will be less affected than others. However, the difference of the effect and the scars that come afterward are largely dependent upon how mom and dad handle the divorce, how they handle each other, and how they handle the children going forward. Did you hear what I said? What determines the depth and the severity of the effect and the scars that come after the divorce, after the separation, is how mom and dad handle the divorce, how they handle each other, and how they handle the children going forward. Right? Because it has to be looked at as an all-inclusive. It has to be looked at as an all-inclusive thing. It cannot be so, well, I'm just mad at him. I'm just mad at her. Ain't got nothing to do with my kids. Wait, hold on. Don't be so quick, because we need to understand that it's all involved. It all matters. It's all interconnected. It all has something to do with the other thing. And so we don't want to just try to isolate them as though they're separate issues. No, they're intertwined. They matter to each other, and they're consequential to each other. And as we mentioned before, after this series of fatherhood is completed within the next few weeks, we will deal with the subject of us men being husbands. So please stay tuned for that, because we're going to roll right off of this into the subject matter of husbands. Unless we kind of have like a review portion of fatherhood and how all the stuff that we've gone through over this, and we might do that, just kind of have a little breakout conversation with that, but we'll see what happens. Nevertheless, we will talk much more about divorce. We will not talk much more about divorce itself in this situation, other than to highlight it in a few points, but rather about what the adults in the situation must do and do with respect to ensure that our children are not collateral damage and casualties of war. Because the adults cannot seem to be able to get past themselves, get past their pride, and get past their breakup and focus on their children. So I'll say that again. While we talk about divorce somewhat on the fringes of this conversation, I also want to make sure that what we're doing is we're putting the main focus on how the adults must handle their children, must handle the situation, so that the children do not become collateral damage and casualties of war, simply because we, the adults, are not able to get past ourselves or our pride or the breakup and focus on our children. Therefore, tonight, we's going to talk about we's going to talk about? We's going to talk about how to co-parent when there is a separation. How to co-parent when there is a separation. I hope you're ready for this discussion tonight, because it's going to get a little, it's going to get kind of up in your face and down in the nitty gritty, kind of going to get down in the bones, if you please. When I used to watch Dr. Phil several years ago, Dr. Phil, if y'all have ever watched him on TV, you can probably understand why I watched him. I don't watch him very much anymore, not necessarily for any reason. I just have stopped watching TV. I guess that's the reason, several years ago. Nevertheless, I used to watch him several years ago, and there were times when he would deal with families that were going through divorce, kind of like what we're going to talk about tonight. Oftentimes, the parents on his show would be at each other's throats, because they were allowed, listen to this, they were at each other's throats because they were allowing the pain of the separation and the divorce to infringe upon their capacity of reasoning and common sense. Did you realize that you can be so hurt, you can be so angry, so upset, that you're not thinking clearly, that you're not thinking rationally, that you're not thinking with common sense, that somehow your decision making is being subjected to some kind of thing where you're not thinking clearly? your cognitive reasoning is not at full capacity because all you are is angry, all you are is hurt, all you are is trying to prove your point or whatever the case might be. And when we allow those emotions to override us and to override our mental capacity so that we're not making wise decisions and speaking wisely and handling things wisely and choosing our words and choosing our approach. When we allow ourselves to get out of control, people get hurt. When we allow ourselves to get out of control, things go awry and things go astray. And we start driving the car of our family over into the ditch. And it's a sad situation. And when I was watching him, he often made two very insightful observations that are tailor-made and tailor-fit for tonight's conversation. You ready to hear the first two? Number one, he would say this. The first thing he would say is, children, write this down, children would rather be from a broken home than live in one. One more time. Children would rather be from a broken home than live in one. Children would rather be from a broken home than live in one. The second point he made was in the form of a question. He said he would challenge the parents in this way. He said, when the two of you are acting like this, who's picking up the tab? Who's paying the bill for your inability to function as reasonable, rational adults? When the two of you are acting like this, who's picking up the tab? Who's paying for your inability to function and act as reasonable, rational adults? Of course, the answer to that question is the children are paying the tab. They're the ones paying the price. We're sitting over here with our gloves on and, we throwing insults and we acting all mean and nasty toward one another as if we don't know each other, as if we never met, as if we don't have something in common that we both must be fighting for, even though we're not going to stay together. But at the same time, we saw on our own agenda. We saw on our own perch. We're so on our own, in our own head and on our own side. We done forgot about these little people over here that are sitting here watching this boxing match, that's watching this MMA fight. And they're paying the price for it. And what is happening in that moment, and it's so dangerous and so volatile. What's happening in that moment is that we're trying to inadvertently make them choose a side. Ain't that terrible? That we're attempting to make them choose. Well, which one y'all gonna go? You go with me, you can go with your mama. And that is so not fair. That is so not fair because your children have a vested interest in both of you. And so do both of you in them. And for you to try to divide this up in terms of loyalty, stop it. You cannot do that. I know some of you have heard me say some of these things before, but they bear repeating because listen, it is such a devastation to a child to sit here and go from right to left to left to right to right to left to left to right, looking backward and forward like they're watching the tennis match, trying to figure out which one am I going to get stuck with because the other one going to feel like I don't love them no more. And we shared this in the last broadcast and prior to this, children have a very interesting way of blaming themselves for the divorce. Of blaming themselves that they could have done something more, something better to keep mom and dad together. So it must be my fault. I must have not been good enough. I must have messed up in school too many times. I must not be pretty enough. I must not be athletic enough. Something must be wrong with me why mom and dad can't stay together. Because after all, what else could there be? Right? And as we begin our discussion tonight, I want to open up our panel for a few moments. Gentlemen, I'm going to open up the panel for a few moments. I want to give you an opportunity to share your experience, either from being from a home where the parents divorced or your children had to go through a divorce because you and your wife could not stay together. So, gentlemen, whether you want to talk about your experience as you were from a home that wound up in divorce, or you were in the home and you and your wife did not necessarily make it, I want to give you about 3 minutes to chime in and tell us how it affected you, or what did it teach you, or what or how things are with you now. And if it was good, how did you recover from it? If it was bad, or if it was bad, what happened? How did you come back from it? And do you still Now, even now, do you still even struggle with it at the present time? I want to know, does anybody have any comments so far? 2 or 3 minutes, please.
Well, I'll take a stab at it, brother.
Go ahead.
Well, see, I got married pretty early. As soon as I had gotten saved about 8 years ago. I kind of, if I'm honest and transparent, I rushed into a marriage, and just going on for the kingdom. But quickly I found out that I was unequally yoked, and a lot of times we find ourselves in situations that we don't necessarily recognize off the bat. It takes some time for us to actually go through the relationship to figure out where we are. And I found myself there, but and years later I found myself separated and going through all sorts of hurts, harms, dangers, and not only just me and my ex-wife, but the children, like you said, collateral damage and things like that. Kids go through a lot more than we see, but they show you through their emotions, and they show you how they interact with you, when you speak with them, or just how they look. It does a damage to them, and but on the other side of this, God is still God. If we're able to submit ourselves to his will, and submit our situations and our just our relationships to God, he steps in, and he begins to work, like the potter on the wheel. And that's where I find myself now, God restoring relationships, and my relationships with my kids and stuff like that. But I can't take any credit for it, because it's a grace that God has given me in those relationships to respond correctly, not how I would respond before. If I'm honest, from my own thoughts, or from my own reservoir of what I thought was right. So and it wasn't right. But now God is able to just show me, rather than me try to show God. And these
Right.
relationships with my kids, I'm able to actually listen, and not always try to do something or speak.
Mm-hmm.